snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! So I am here today to talk to you about 3 different books that I've recently read. Unfortunately, I didn't love any of these and I had a few issues with each of them, so it'll be an interesting one to compare them all because I gave them all the same rating. However, I would say that I have one that I am really sad that I had to give it this rating, and the other 2 were more expecting that as I went into them and as I read through further, I kind of realised that they were going to be this rating. But one of them was really disappointing and the other 2 weren't so much. So let's start off with the more predictable ones, the ones that I thought would probably not get a 4 or 5 star rating. The first one that I have to talk to you about is Six of Crows. This is a Grisha novel and it's by Leigh Bardugo, and I really wanted to enjoy this even though I already read Shadow and Bone, which is the first one in the Grisha trilogy, and I didn't love it. I was hoping maybe this one would be a series I would enjoy a bit more because obviously it's been a little while since she wrote that series and she's probably progressed as a writer, and also I heard that you didn't have to have finished the Grisha series to read this, so I thought I would dive in and give it a go, and I did this as a buddy read with Will and Chelsea. I will put a link to Chelsea's channel below and Will's blog. I definitely enjoyed doing a buddy read with them. I don't think I'd have got through it otherwise, not because it was terrible, but just because I had other stuff at the time that I wanted to read and this really wasn't capturing my attention. Basically, we follow a band of mercenaries as they sort of hire themselves out to go on a mission and do a sort of heist of something very valuable to the people who hire them. And it's all about this young boy called Kaz and his team of friends who all get together and they all have different roles within the team and they all are good for different things, and you basically discover a bit more about the characters, each of them, as you go through the story, because each of them has their own part to play. Very sort of standard heist idea, and they all have to come up with a plan, and of course things go wrong along the way, that sort of thing. It's very kind of stereotypical. That's the biggest problem I had with this, was that nothing really surprised me, nothing really captivated me. It was a very light, very easy read, but that was all it was, and for me there wasn't really anything more than that going on. I do think that Leigh Bardugo discussed some small interesting things. For example, her main character has a limp, which is something you don't necessarily see that often with main characters, and we also have other characters who are hinted at being LGBTQ characters, but it was kind of very small. It was just there because I think she wanted to put it there. I don't know how well integrated I would say it was, or whether it was a vital part of the story or anything. It's just, it's in there if you are interested. However, I wouldn't say it's a terrible series or a terrible book. I haven't read the rest, obviously. I don't think I'm going to be continuing just because it didn't hook me in enough, it didn't interest me enough, but I think also part of the problem was that whilst I was reading this, I was also reading the next book I'm going to tell you about, and that one was better. So it was hard for this one to live up to it, and it was a very similar style of book, so it was always going to be a bit of a challenge for this one to win out. It's quite a chunky book, I must say. It's around 500 pages, so it's quite a chunky one, but it did not take me very long to read. I think I read this in 2 days, so definitely one that you could get through quickly. If you do like YA and you're very interested in that, then this is probably one you will enjoy. If you like things like the Grisha original trilogy, then I'm sure you would like this. But for me, I felt like the world building and depth that I wanted for this book was really, really lacking because she expects people to have read the previous series. You don't have to understand it, but I think it would have really helped on the world building elements and just generally making it a more immersive story had I known exactly what the powers of each of the Grishas was and exactly what world they were in, because it didn't feel like she developed those things enough and the main focus was on the characters and what they were doing, which is fine, but I did really miss the elements of world building that I wanted to see, and that would really have fleshed this out and made it better. So unfortunately I ended up giving this a 2 out of 5 stars, and I couldn't really give it anything more than that because I just didn't quite get any of the stuff I was hoping for, like the really exciting twists or some really great developments of characterization or some really fantastic world building. None of that was quite on a level that I really felt was good. I felt it was just all very standard and unfortunately didn't progress to the level where I could give it a 3 or a 4-star rating. So 2 stars is all I could give this. The next one I have to talk to you about is The Copper Promise, which is by Jen Williams, and as I said in the previous one, I was reading this at the same time as reading Six of Crows, and I think that really made Six of Crows worse than maybe it would have been had I read it on its own. This is also a heist book. It also follows a band of mercenaries who hire themselves out, and in this one I felt like it was much better. This is an adult fiction, whereas I believe the other one is targeted at YA, which is not a problem, but I definitely think you can tell that this one deals with more mature themes, and I definitely felt as though this was better written on the whole, just captivated me more, made me more interested. I would say this is a very, very light adult fantasy. I would not say it's a heavy one. It doesn't really push the boundaries or make you think about anything deep. It's very light, it's very classic sword and sorcery with a heist element to it, and if you want that sort of thing and you like that sort of thing, then that's definitely something that will appeal to you. Pick this one up. However, if you've read sword and sorcery before and you know what the tropes are, then this isn't going to offer you anything particularly new. It does do the same sorts of things that a lot of other ones do. This was actually published originally as, I think, 5 different novellas, and those 5 novellas were then put together into this story to make up the whole book. I do think you can definitely tell it's 5 novellas. It doesn't necessarily flow from one to the next very well. It feels like 5 separate short stories, which isn't bad, but definitely didn't give you the character growth that one continuous long novel would have given. And so on the whole, I felt like this was better than Six of Crows in terms of what it offered and in terms of how the heist went and how the story went and how connected you were to the characters and the world building. That was all a lot better than Six of Crows, but it still didn't captivate me. It still didn't make me really fall in love with the characters. It still didn't really give me something original. It was very classic fantasy, sword and sorcery, and it didn't do anything particularly new, which is a shame because I was hoping it would be something really fun, and it was fun and it had good moments, but I don't think I'll continue with it just because it's so average, which sounds bad to say, but it is very average, very middle of the road sword and sorcery that is fun, light, easy to get through, but nothing I would highly recommend. So again, I gave this a 2.5 stars, so slightly higher. And now on to the final one that I have in this video to talk to you about, and that is The Mirror Empire by Cameron Hurley. Now this one I read on Kindle, and I read it as a buddy read with Paul and Mercedes, and we also had Michael there talking with us, although he'd already read it. I wanted to love this book so much. I really loved the beginning of this book, and I thought it was going to be at least a 4 stars, possibly a 5 stars for a large majority of the beginning section. I really enjoyed it, probably up until the halfway point, and then I think things started to go a little bit downhill. This is a story where we have parallel worlds. It's a really interesting concept. It has some very wonderful world building, and Cameron Hurley is very much the person who can give you original ideas. The thing that I've been complaining about in the previous 2, not having original content, was not a problem in this book. It was original, it was unique, it was exciting, and I definitely felt like I did connect to some of the characters at the beginning of the book. However, as it went on, I felt like this connection was kind of lost. The characters did things that I didn't think they should have done, and so I couldn't believe that they were genuine anymore. There were some characters that particularly irritated me, and I just could not believe in them or want them to succeed. I just got irritated with them, which was really frustrating because they started out as strong characters and then just got weaker, in my opinion. And the biggest problem for me with this book was that, unfortunately, even though I loved the beginning and felt it was so good and had so much potential, it didn't ever reach that potential. And even when it felt like it was coming to the climax of the book, it was such a letdown. There was so much that could have been done really well and wasn't, and it was really depressing when we got to the end and we'd been building up to this big moment and this big exciting thing that's going to happen, and the character does the thing and it's a real letdown. It's very easy for the character to achieve this thing they've been working towards, even though the whole book is building up to it. When it actually comes to the time, all they do is sort of stroll over, do it, and then it's done. And it was very anticlimactic. It didn't feel like it was a great big epic moment. It felt like it was very boring, and it didn't feel genuine. It didn't feel like that was a realistic way that the situation would have gone, and that was a real problem for all of us in the chat because we had all hoped it was going to be something really fantastic. Cameron Hurley also deals with gender roles really well in this book. I think this is one of the strongest books I've seen that deals with gender, because it has really interesting gender flips and gender reversals. We also have some really interesting hierarchy that goes on in some of the different sections of people and types of people that we meet in this. We basically follow a young girl, and her mother at the very beginning is being chased down by these people, and she's really worried, and her mother sends her into another world to protect her daughter, and when she sends her daughter into this other world, the daughter doesn't know that that's what's happening, and she has to discover that, and she ends up living in this sort of monastery-esque place for a while where she grows up and she learns more and more things about the world generally, and she then decides that she needs to avenge her mother and find out what happened to her and what's really going on with the world, and that's where the story really picks up and takes off. And that idea was very fine, like I didn't have a problem with that at all, and the character at first was fine, but I just really didn't like that we lost so much of what could have been a really fantastic book. We lost the excitement of the gender, we lost the interest of these characters, and we lost the originality of the world when it finally became about the plot, and that was all it was, and the plot went downhill, and that was a real disappointment because this book really had potential. This series has potential. I'm sure the second one does get better, but I don't feel like I want to even pick up the second one because of how disappointed I was at the ending of this, and I've never felt quite as disappointed as this, I don't think, because it was such a good beginning, and that's so sad to say that it really went downhill. I wish it hadn't, because I wish I could have given this a 4 stars, I really do. I couldn't, it just wasn't there, and it didn't have that magical potential to get a 3 or a 4 or even a 5. There was no chance of that by the time all of this had happened, and unfortunately all of us in the chat agreed that it really was upsetting that it didn't have that payoff and it didn't work out. So yeah, I would say that none of these books are ones I would highly recommend, but if you're going to pick any of them up, then Mirror Empire is a good one. However, be very aware that the ending is not going to be epic. It's not going to be a really exciting ending because it's very anticlimactic. If you're okay with that, that's fine. I mean, things do get resolved. It's not a cliffhanger, but it didn't feel like it paid off at all reading the book. It felt like a big letdown for me and everyone else. So that was a real disappointment and a really upsetting one because I was so hoping to love it, but oh well. I guess that's how these things go. I would love to hear your thoughts if you guys have read any of the 3 that I've just mentioned, because they're all quite different. One of them's a YA, one of them's an adult sword and sorcery, and one of them is a parallel dimension fantasy kind of sci-fi cross. I would love to hear your thoughts on each of them and whether you've read them and whether you will be reading them. Unfortunately, I couldn't give any of them higher than a 2, 2.5, so that's kind of disappointing, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about them too. Thank you all for watching. I will see you all again soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat.